Well, East Tennessee Zone, WDVX. Of course, it's your good buddy Colton Zenni, and I am excited today to be hanging out before Merle Fest with the Infamous Stringdusters' very own Andy Falco.
Hey,
Thanks so much for hanging out with me here today.
Thanks for coming to chill, man. It's great to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the pleasure of seeing you in a stripped-down outfit last night, Charlotte, North Carolina, at the Neighborhood Theater. It was Book and Falco play Garcia, or play
Yeah,
the
we
Dead.
do Falco and Book play Garcia, and it's just a side project that we really love to do when we're not on the road with the Dusters. It's just an opportunity to, with the Stringdusters, that's where we can be artists and we can write our music and we can do our thing. And this is just an opportunity to sort of honor, somebody who has been incredibly influential to us in our musical trajectory, Jerry Garcia. And sort of unapologetically play his music all night, and as I always tell the audience with that, it's not so much about us celebrating Garcia for the audience, but rather us celebrating Garcia with the audience. So that's the idea there, that we're all sort of fans of this amazing artist that just influence. And I think for a lot of people too, even if you're not a musician that's influenced by it, I think a lot of people with that music, it's just, was a soundtrack to their own lives. And obviously there's just so many people that feel the same way we do about it. So it's just a really fun thing to go around and do,
In your mind, why is the Dead's music or Garcia's music so sticky and so apt to be interpreted and reinterpreted by different artists and different configurations and different setups? You're one of the best pickers out there, and you could go do, why are you doing a Garcia music and not, Jimmy Martin or,
Well, because for everyone has their own musical DNA, and for me, and what makes up somebody's musical DNA to me is like, if you're a musician, the influences that you had along the way. I didn't grow up playing bluegrass music. I grew up, listening to at a young age, listening to the Beatles and bands like that. My parents' record collection, that eventually, through my older brother, got me into the Grateful Dead at a young age, and that was hugely influential in me. He also at the same time was introducing me to guitar. So we were kind of like playing, when we would be jamming Dead tunes. And so like to me, for some people, they grew up in like the traditional bluegrass world, right? So traditional music that you might say, oh, this is like a trad bluegrass tune. It might be like a Monroe tune. It might be a Flat and Scruggs tune, which you'd call like, trad bluegrass almost, For me, I didn't grow up playing that stuff. So, for me, like when I'm playing the Grateful Dead song, it's almost like, a bluegrass player playing a Monroe tune or a Flat and Scruggs tune, That's sort of like where I came from, with my brothers, but both of my brothers are musicians.
It's like that's your baseline in
kind of, in a lot of ways. And also, the influence that eventually, through the Grateful Dead at a young age, realizing that, a lot of these songs are coming from other places in the American, music, songbook. I mean, country music, bluegrass music, blues music, and so it was kind of listening to the radio in New York one day when I was listening to, and I think it was like Reverend Gary Davis or somebody, and there was this song called Samson and Delilah, which he's singing.
Of course.
And I remember listening to it, going, wow, how cool of this old blues guy to be doing a Grateful Dead song. And then I sort of like, I remember having a moment, that aha moment, where I was like, wait a minute, no, it's
the other way around.
Okay, and so that I kind of was, inspired to go back a little bit, and I would say the Allman Brothers Band, same kind of thing with the blues, but hearing these bands, because getting into the Grateful Dead, the Allman Brothers Band was almost like the Grateful Dead on like steroids in a way. It was kind of like similar in a way to me, just in the fact that it was just kind of really raw and but it had the Allman's energy and stuff. But we were going back to these records, and that's kind of ultimately what got us. And I say us, like my brother, mainly was like such a huge. My older brother was a big influence on our musical, direction. But yeah, we were going back to blues records and going back to and getting into some bluegrass through Old and the Way, and and that was kind of the start of all this sort of roots music kind of journey, for us. And so, to answer your question, I think it's like for the Grateful Dead specifically, I think it's the songs that they wrote. I mean, the songs are really great songs. There's a lot
Hunter's
of
writing.
I mean, unbelievable. With Garcia, and we all of those guys.
And Barlow. And,
yeah, right. They were all sort of writing, cool, timeless music in a way. Kind of Americana music, what we would maybe define as Americana music now.
Right.
But also, people love the genuine article, right? People love artists who are just genuine. I think that's like a big part of someone like Billy Strings, for example, who is skyrocketed and done things in bluegrass that just nobody even thought were possible,
right,
as far as playing in arenas and a lot of reason why. I mean, not only is Billy just a great musician, but he stays extremely, he's a very genuine,
very earnest. There's a real feeling of earnestness,
and that's kind of like what the Grateful Dead were like to, in my eyes. I think that's what makes them so timeless, is having that, that. So I think that's a big part of it all.
Absolutely. Well, I totally agree with you, and I wonder, you started playing along the same amounts of time. You started playing, sounds like your brother was sort of putting you on music at the time you were getting into guitar.
Yeah.
What was then the first music that you played on the guitar, and when did you start getting into bluegrass then? Because I know you as Andy Falco from the Infamous Stringdusters, progressive bluegrass sort of jamgrass outfit, and one of the best in the game. So when did you get into the flat picking?
Well, we were once I was in middle school, and we started playing in band. We had bands that we played in, and there was we would just jam kind of every day after school, and in that time period we were playing, definitely stuff from the Grateful Dead songbook, but we were also playing a lot of classic rock and stuff like that. And in fact, we're going to be talking some about these picks, but the founder of that company was somebody that I grew up with, that was also a couple years younger than me, but also playing in bands, and we were growing up, learning our pentatonic scales together,
right.
But we were jamming, and Grateful Dead, a lot of 60s, rock music, classic rock stuff, was what we were playing. But we were also kind of writing songs too a little bit, and doing that, and and so it was electric guitar for me, back then, playing electric guitar.
So you started all electric. That was the first guitar playing you did.
Yeah, and then it was later, when I was playing, years later, right, we had a band called the Ward Street Blues Band. It was a New England, a Northeast, band that we had that was based in New York, where we're from, and it was kind of during that period that we started playing, because my older brother was getting deeper into bluegrass and stuff, kind of via Old and the Way. My father had a Doc Watson record. My parents had a pretty eclectic record collection, but I remember looking at that Doc Watson record, the Vanguard one. It was a black and white picture of Doc on there, but never really put it on,
right.
Because when we were kids, I was putting in more apt to put in Magical Mystery Tour, because you look at the record and it just looks like a party.
That's the Doc record where he's in a sheriff's get up, right?
No. It's just the first record where he's just a black and white picture of him. And so it didn't, we're just kind of oh, that's cool, but it was in that record collection. But so, we started doing this gig. My older brother Tom wasn't in that band, but he would sit in with us sometimes. And then there's this venue owner on Long Island that we used to play, and she had this other venue at the time. And she was like, hey, why don't you guys try to do it'd be fun to do a Sunday thing with Tom, because when he sits in, you guys do a different thing. We're like, oh, that's cool. So we started doing a gig I think it was every other Sunday, and we started, bringing in some of this. It was kind of acoustic version of the band. I mean, we had drums, we had keyboards, we were all plugged in and everything, but we had an acoustic version of the band with my brother playing, and we started tapping into a lot of this bluegrass sort of material. It was almost this is the late '90s. It's kind of like Jamgrass, sort of what Jamgrass sort of turned into later, but But you know, we were kind of doing a similar thing, you know, in the East Coast with it, where we were kind of like using the kind of jam sensibilities and rock influences, but like playing bluegrass tunes in that context. And then I met, through that, there was this guy who worked at a radio station, a local WUSB, which is Stony Brook University Radio.
Right on.
Very cool radio station up on Long Island. And this guy, Gordon, I don't even know where he is now, but he was this really kind of strange old hippie kind of character. And he kind of talked like this. You know? And I remember him, you know, and when he'd come to all our gigs, and when he danced, he had this like real crazy sort of like dance he would do. But I remember him one time going, "Oh, you know, have you met Buddy Miriam?" And Buddy Miriam is a Long Island bluegrass mandolin player who really learned to play bluegrass mandolin when he was first starting to play. He went to go see. He was up at what is now the Gray Fox Bluegrass Festival, but it was the Berkshire Mountain Bluegrass Festival back then in upstate New York, and he met Monroe, and you know, couldn't believe, because he was coming from like, you know, being a fan of rock and roll, and so he couldn't believe that like here's like Bill Monroe just like standing outside of his bus. And so he went and said hello, and he had the mandolin on his back or something, and Monroe was like, "Oh, you play that mandolin?" He's like, "I'm just learning." And he's like, "Well, you're gonna learn to play it right." You know, he's like, "Okay," you know, had this like amazing little kind of meeting with Bill Monroe.
Unbelievable, right?
And then later that night at the show, he was watching, you know, Monroe wasn't playing, but like, you know, the night show was happening, and all of a sudden they come on, the weather starts to turn. And they come on the mics, "Okay, everybody go back to your campsites because there's some thunder and lightning in the area." And then he wakes up, you know, in a hospital because he got struck by lightning.
Wow.
And he woke up, and, you know, and Monroe kind of heard about it and like sort of reached out to check on him because he heard that this fan was struck by lightning, and they became friends. And so when Monroe would come to New York, he would invite Buddy to come, and Buddy would like sit on the bus with them, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I'm learning, you know, wheelhouse, Bill." And and he, you know, and
Bill Monroe goes,
yeah, and Bill would go, "Well, no, you got to play this note like this," you know, like he has this he has like tapes and tapes of them because he would like record a lot of
That's
them.
just unbelievable.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. So he has incredible experience, and you know, devoted his life to being, you know, a bluegrass mandolin player, and he's still actively writing a lot of music, and in fact I'm playing with him in a couple weeks because he's doing like his last like Buddy Miriam Backroad show, so I'm going to go be a part of that.
Awesome.
But
where is that?
That's on Long Island, yeah. And so, you know, but when he came, so this guy Gordon, "Oh, have you met Buddy?" You know, because I don't know. He said, "Well, I'm gonna bring him." You know, I said, "Okay, whatever, man." So I remember a couple weeks later, we're playing, and in walks Gordon, and there's a guy with a mandolin case, you know. And I was playing a little bit of mandolin on that gig, a little bit of dobro maybe, and guitar and stuff. And so we finished a set break, and we get to meet Buddy, and, "Hey, man, why don't you sit in?" "Sure," you know. So he gets up, and now it's like he's like a real bluegrass mandolin player, you know. So I'm like, fuck, man, you know, like, all right, well. So after we jammed, we had a great time, and we were like, "Hey, man, what are you doing every other week? You want to play this gig with us?" "Sure." So he starts playing with us. So that's kind of the beginning of bluegrass. And at that point, I don't even think I owned an acoustic guitar. I think I was borrowing someone's acoustic guitar to do that gig. And then like that following summer, I think I was up in, my brother was at a bluegrass festival then it was called Winterhawk, which was the same festival where Buddy got struck by lightning, different name. It's Gray Fox now. And I was doing some gigs, electric gigs up there. My brother's like, "You should pop by this bluegrass festival." All right, you know, "Sure, man," you know. So the night before I went, I drove up there. I had like black jeans and a black t-shirt. And it's like hot as hell, you know. And I kind of walk up the mountain, and, you know, back then no cell phones. I had to find my brother and like a camp. But like, and then I ran into Buddy, you know, and I'm like, "Hey, man," you know, and he's like, "Yeah, your brother's like over there." So went and hung out at the Bluegrass Festival. It was my first time at a Bluegrass Festival, and then there was like I stayed overnight, and then the next morning I had to go to my gig, but like before I had to go, there was a guitar workshop, and cool, a guitar workshop. So I'm gonna go check it out. I'm curious what that's all about. and it was a guitar workshop with Jack Lawrence. I didn't know who Jack Lawrence was at the time. So I was like, oh, I'm a bluegrass guitar. Okay, I'll go check it out, see what they. So I sat. They just had this little platform kind of like under a tent, and I'm sat kind of in the front, sort of. And there's Jack Lawrence, and they're getting ready. And then I look, and he's got somebody with them, and that's that guy from that record my dad had. Right? It's Doc Watson, right? And I'm like, that's that guy, And they sit. They were like, I could practically reach and touch them. They were, maybe it was like 10 feet away. I'm just like watching, and so they do this guitar workshop where they're just picking, and I'm like watching Doc Watson and Jack rip, and I'm like, and I just walked away from that going like, I got to get an acoustic guitar. I want to do that, So not long after that, I got an acoustic guitar, and I really started diving deeper into bluegrass. So that's kind of a long story, but that's really how I got into playing bluegrass.
So Doc and Jack at a festival.
Yeah, like I was getting turned on by it from my brother and from Buddy and stuff, and I was like playing some of it, but then like when I really was like, I want to do that like almost all the time, is when I kind of saw that and just seeing Doc and Jack ripping up close and being like, I'd never seen anything like it before, and so that's what inspired me to really like buy an acoustic guitar and really like start to like learn how to do it, as best as I could. And so that was it. And then I played in Buddy's band for a while, and then I moved to Nashville and played in some bands and then connected with the Dusters. But like before I moved to Nashville, Chris Pandolfi from the Dusters, Andy Hall from the Dusters, they're both, from New York State as well. And so I met those guys kind of separately, on the sort of on the scene, like in the Northeast sort of bluegrass scene. Like met these guys, picked with them a few times. We'd see each other here and there, and like we got to know each other. And then Pandolfi actually played in our band, in Buddy's band, a bunch of gigs for like a season, and like so we were like friends. And then they kind of moved down. Andy Hall moved down first, and then they moved down and they started like the band because they met. Independent of me, and then they, got together with Chris Eldridge, and they like went down to Nashville and connected with Jeremy, and they started the Stringdusters, and then I moved down there a little bit after them, and I was doing some stuff, and then not long after the first Stringdusters album came out is when Chris Eldridge left to do Punch Brothers, and then so they asked me if I would join the band.
So that first record was in 06 ish.
Yeah, right.
When did you come to the band then?
07.
07. So you've been with the Stringdusters then for
19 years.
19 years.
In September will be 19 years.
And how apt to be talking to you here at Merle Fest in Wilkesboro. You said it last night, the house that Doc built.
Yeah.
Talking to you tonight before the Dusters will be playing the Merle Fest at the Bluegrass Festival.
Yeah.
It's crazy to be, that those moments with Doc at the festival sort of were among those instrumental moments to get you into the bluegrass scene. It's awesome to be talking to you about it here now, 19 years later,
yeah, man,
after you've been in the Dusters. And I want to talk a little bit about, of course, the new 2020 record.
Yeah, we're really excited about it, and the idea of that was that we were going to be making a new record. We had the idea of like, hey, why don't we do 20 songs for 20 years since it's our 20th year, and let's do that. And but we weren't sure if we were going to be able to write 20 good. We didn't want to just do 20 songs. We wanted it had to
20
be
great
they
songs.
had to be 20 of our best songs. And so we decided, like, what happens a lot is with a record cycle is like as a band you kind of plan out with your management teams and stuff, like, and your booking agencies and stuff like that, like. You're looking ahead at your schedule and going, okay, we're going to record in this time, so that means we should have the record done by this time, and then that gives the team an opportunity to, like, they got to look ahead, book like the release tour, and the management's got to plan how the release is going to go, when the date's going to be released, and so all this is kind of laid out, like kind of like all at once, and so then you go in the studio and you make a record and you have your songs and you make your record, right? But maybe like you're like, oh man, I wish we had like a little bit more time to write, or like, oh, we could, but like, you're kind of on a deadline, you sort of like, well, at a certain point you have to just kind of move on, with this one, we kind of didn't want to do that. So that's kind of the big thing that we did differently with this record is we didn't make any sort of timeline in the post part of the record. It was like, let's try to write the best songs that we possibly can, and then let's go record them and see what we got. And then if we feel like we're missing something, let's go back to the writing and then come back to it and record more and sort of keep on until we feel like we have the best songs that we could possibly write, you know. And when we feel good about that, then we cue the team in and then they can plan this stuff.
Right.
And this way we don't have any kind of deadline, and it was really great to be able to do that. Now we weren't sure if we were going to be able to have 20 songs that we felt were our best songs. We ended up with
20 songs is a lot.
Yeah, but we ended up with just about 50 that we were contenders for the record, of which I would say, 43 were all we were happy enough with to put on the record.
To put on the record.
Which was a lot. And so a lot to sort through, but we were happy about that because then we chose what we thought at that point. Then you're picking songs that are going to work well together on the record, but we did have the opportunity as we were in that process. We did it in several sessions, so it was like, oh, let's record a batch of songs, and we're looking at the list, going, okay, well, we've narrowed it down, but we could use this kind of a tune or this kind of a song, and okay, and then we'd all kind of go out and then write some more and then come back, oh yeah, I got this, and it's like, oh yeah, that one would be cool, and we were able to really kind of hone in on what we wanted the record to be on this one, and so we feel really proud of it.
Did you feel that when you were sourcing songs or writing and sourcing those, that you were sort of going back and tapping into moments in the band, in your 19 years with the band?
Absolutely. I mean, and this record is definitely, consciously has more probably bluegrass sounding stuff on. I mean, we're always a bluegrass band, but we like to play lots of different types of grooves and really experiment and with the instruments, the bluegrass instruments, and try to create different soundscapes and stuff. And this one is definitely deliberately a little bit edges a little bit more like straight up bluegrass, because that's kind of where we came from. So a lot of ways it does have a feel more like a fork in the road, which is our first record. It kind of has more of that kind of a feel when we were more traditional bluegrass sounding, in a lot of ways than some of the other records we've done.
Yeah, you can really hear that on the record, and there's a great mini documentary out that you guys released alongside the record on YouTube, which is just a great watch. And so it's interesting to me that I thought, sort of as I was thinking about, how would you do a 20-year sort of retrospective record? And I thought one way is how we just talked about it, where you go and sort of try to take yourself back to specific moments in time and source from those specific headspaces or experiences or time frames. Or was it something where none of it could have happened without 20 collective years of experience?
Yeah, probably, and it's and as you go with 20 years with the band, you really start, I mean, we work so well together, the five of us, that, we've definitely put more than our 10,000 hours in together. And so,
to be true experts.
I mean, just within ourselves, and it's and I guess every band that has been doing it for a long time has that, and it's just, we just, the workflow has just gotten much easier over the years to be able to, you have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. We're a fully democratic band, and so, And
are you guys a 6-piece band?
5.
5-piece.
So we have 5 cooks in the kitchen,
right.
But for some reason, it works really well with us. It's not really, there's never any kind of real struggles. It just, everything kind of flows real naturally. And I think we really like to lean on that when we're in the studio, because I think when you really overthink things, I think things can sound really contrived. And, going back to what we're talking about, you want the music to be really as authentic to ourselves as possible. Authenticity is really, the only way to really put out, music that is truly going to be, I mean, it's never going to be good unless it's authentic, number one, and authentic to yourself. I mean, and so if you feel good about it, you feel like it, and so I think we've gotten pretty good at just like really letting that sort of flow naturally out of us and not try to like, contrive things or overthink things to a point where, you lose that.
Right. I want to talk about your 19, 20 plus years in this scene, in the bluegrass scene or the progressive bluegrass scene or the jamgrass scene, whatever you want to call it. And, it feels like bluegrass really comes in waves. The Dillards on the Andy Griffith Show, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? It feels like today.
Well, now you have Billy Strings.
Bluegrass is on a huge wave, and you are, and the Dusters are a part of this group of bands that I see in my mind. Like you guys, like Green Sky, like Salmon, like String Cheese, who were like this first wave of what we think of as what Jamgrass is like today. Do you see that? I told you before we started talking, I hung out with Kaiser George not long ago of Shadowgrass, and they're super hot right now. And I hung out with Luke Black and Josiah Nelson of Mountain Grass last year too. They both mentioned you guys, and you specifically, as being, they heard your stuff alongside traditional bluegrass, and they said, "Oh my goodness, we can really do this. We can do this."
And they can.
Yeah, they sure can.
They sure can.
How have you seen the Jamgrass scene grow and change and develop? And what was the scene like when you first got into it, and how's it different today?
It was much different. Bluegrass has become very cool, very I think like when we were first starting playing bluegrass, especially where I come from in New York, it was sort of like, people didn't really understand. They didn't have really sort of a point of reference, really. Things like Oh Brother always help, Alison Krauss, stuff like that, over. But I think now, especially with Billy's doing things that are, we just never thought were possible in bluegrass. I never thought you'd see somebody selling out multiple nights in an arena playing bluegrass music like Billy is, and like I said, Billy Strings is somebody who is just, there's an authenticity there that is just really, it's not something that you can manufacture, and he's an amazing, incredible bluegrass artist that's playing real bluegrass in arenas. It's really great, and and it's really, he's reaching people that are beyond just in the bluegrass or jamgrass scene. He's really bringing in people outside of that, people who don't listen to any other bluegrass really, and it's incredible. And it's turned a lot of people onto the music, and I think most notably too, it's like these young pickers that are coming up, like guys like Kaiser or Luke, or these young guitar players that are like hearing Billy doing his thing, and they're kind of they're starting from just this higher level of understanding, and I think like
so they heard you first. Not to jump in on you, but they heard you first.
And that's, I think it's just like really cool, like and they're just playing just unbelievably. These young guys just like playing just unbelievable stuff, and it's just great to see that, and you feel good. We've been doing this a long time, and you feel good. When you see these young guys coming up, and they're it's like you're like, oh yeah, the music is in good hands, and it's gonna continue, and I think they're gonna be influencing a whole other generation of young pickers, and they'll take it to where they're gonna take it, and I think it's just really exciting, and I think it's really, I feel very lucky to be a very, very small part of this, lineage of where the music is going, that we just kind of, it's kind of like a train journey, and you kind of jumped on, we, as the history of the music goes, we've kind of jumped on the train for a little bit, and and then eventually you got to get up and make room for the young ones. But in the meantime, we're still on the train, and we're still just trying to do the best, make the best art we can.
Absolutely. Well, I think us out here in the listening audience in Radio Land, wherever you listen, we're the real benefactors from the whole thing. Man, I don't want to, I know we're a little over time
That's
here.
okay.
I want to make sure we got plenty of time for token.
Yeah. I'm lucky, I play, I play bourgeois guitars, you know, they're made up in Maine. I play D'Addario strings, you know, they're incredible, and you know the tone really, you know, matters to, especially when you're playing acoustic instruments. And you know, just recently, you know, we talked a little bit about when I was growing up and we were playing music. So just recently, we were hanging out on a Zoom call and talking guitars, and so my friend Daniel. That I grew up with playing with was like, hey man, hey, I'm making these picks, you know, and I was playing other picks, and I was also going through this sort of pick sort of phase where I was looking for something that was, but I was, you know, the picks I was using, I was like, I think these are sort of, and I said, yeah man, I'll check out your picks. I mean, I don't know, you know, I've been kind of using these for a little while, but you know, sure man, I'll check them out and give you some feedback, you know. And he sent me these picks, and these are called Token. That's the name of the company.
Token picks. We've got Daniel here. Why don't we take a second, reset, and bring him in on this conversation?
Let's do it.
Okay, great addition to our hangout. It's Daniel Flanigan.
How you doing?
Token picks.
All right.
I
Thanks,
think we want to
Colton.
learn some about these token picks, and I want to ask you first.
Yeah.
I think that there are some players out there who would say, well, man, when I go to Guitar Center, they've got free red picks in bowls.
Yeah.
Why don't I just use one of those?
Well, it depends what style you're playing, but for sure, like in bluegrass world and flat picking, you want a thick pick. But if you're playing a thick pick, you also want it to be fast, so then you want a speed bevel. So it's like this magic combination of a thick pick with a speed bevel that gives you the magic that you want when you're doing like serious flat picking. And to get a really good speed bevel, you do that individually. So that's why it doesn't cost 50 cents. Like 50-cent picks are stamped out of celluloid sheets, hundreds a minute. These kinds of picks are made individually. Whether they're hand beveled or machine beveled like ours, they're still made like one at a time. So yeah, that's what you get. And then the material. So you get like premium material, a thick pick, a good speed bevel, and that's what you're looking for if you're doing like real technical flat picking.
As a player, you know, what's the difference to you, you know, in playing a really nice pick versus a crappy pick that they give out for free anyway?
Yeah, it's like, well, I had said before, it's like, you know, in The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy, you know, the house lands and she's kind of like, she grabs her dog and she's walking to the door and she opens up the door and then all of a sudden it's in color. I think it's like, you know, because it's not only, I mean, it's the speed bevel that's made where, meaning just sort of the bevels are just perfect on these picks every single time. And it's you know, a lot of thought put into the shape, the thicknesses, but also the materials that are being used are really toneful. You know, it's like there's a like a 3D dimension to me. Like what I hear is like, I feel like it brings out the best in the tone of my instruments. You know, so when I'm putting that pick on these D'Addario strings on my bourgeois guitar, I feel like I'm getting the absolute best possible tone that I can get, you know, from the gear itself. Some of it's then up to me, you know.
Right.
But you know what I mean, I have to, you know, but what happens is when you're starting from that point of where everything is optimum, you know, tonally, you're inspired and you end up playing more and you end up, you know, feeling better about what you're playing. And you know, so much of playing music is mental, you know. And when you're hearing things sound the way you want them to hear, you really just, it kind of opens you up a lot more to play better. So, you know, so sometimes people will say, well, can a pick really make you play better? And I, you know, and the answer to me is yes, and for that reason, because when, just like a you know, a fine guitar, you know, compared to something that doesn't sound great or doesn't feel good when you're playing it, you're just not gonna, I mean, can a great player make that sound good? Sure, but you know, you're gonna have to work for it a little bit. Whereas, like, you know, when you're inspired by the sounds of these beautiful instruments and the right gear, like these great picks or these great strings, you know, you're really just gonna play better because you're just feeling like, wow, inspired by what you're hearing. So I have several of them, and I even, you know, I'm even, you know, using different thicknesses and experimenting with different things, and he has several different materials that he's making, and sometimes, I mean, last night I changed my pick in the middle of the show because I, you know, just felt like a tune, and I used to never do anything like that, but I have a couple different thicknesses, and I just kind of felt like, it's almost like a little extra thing on my palette to
That
use.
was part of the design of the product suite, was to have picks that are so consistent that subtle differences are repeatable. And then every single model has 3 different materials. So like the amber is more treble focused, the tan is more sort of rounder, and the green is just really full and really loud. And so you can play with it like EQ knobs almost. So there's new things to discover when you start checking out token picks. Yeah.
So none of these picks then involve the illegally sourcing tortoise shell or something like that.
No.
Going to the local pawn shop and trying to find an old tortoise ashtray or something.
Which I have a lot of shell picks too, which I typically use a lot more, historically for me, like when I'm recording rather than live. And so, again, it's like, it's an opportunity to kind of have another sort of detail to the choices I'm making when I'm playing that include, the strings I'm using, the guitar I'm using, the pick I'm using is very, it's more than just, the feel, which is a big part of it. The feel is incredible. And, like he pointed out, the consistency, because, typically like these boutique picks are and I think that's like a big part of what's unique about these picks is that typically they're sort of hand beveled and hand done, which of course they're done that way. There's going to be inconsistencies to some degree, and there are, and these are done in CNC. These are machine done, so it's like they're exact. Each one is exact, and exact. Each one you pick up is exactly what it's meant to be. And so that consistency is great, and I think also that also allows that they're always available, because he can
consistency and availability.
Right, they're more available than sometimes they run out of the other picks and the other companies and stuff.
The boutique market blew up after the Wall Street Journal came out it was 2025, first week of June. It was like a 13-minute video piece. John Mayer's on there talking about his blue chips. Mm-hmm. I think it was within, I don't know, a week or maybe days, I don't know.
They're gone.
That blue chips were getting sold out. I had the idea for Token just a month before that, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I think Wall Street Journal just blew up the market, and it's persisted. Like the demand for this level of pick is far outpacing the supply. And so at first I was just really interested in getting into like quality and diversity of options for players. And then I realized, oh wow, I could potentially also solve this problem of availability. And so focus very heavily on machining versus hand beveling, which no one else was doing, because it's actually very difficult to figure out how to do that in a CNC machine. And we've had a design, and we make our own cutting tools actually to make those picks. So there's like a lot involved in going that route, but the benefit of that is it's scalable.
So where can folks go to learn more about Token Picks and find them? Where can they learn more?
Yeah, so our website is tokenmade.com. You can follow us on Instagram at tokenmade, Facebook tokenmade. We post a lot of news and updates and stories there.
That's tokenmade.com to learn more about Token Flat Picks. And of course, you're out on the road with the Stringdusters all summer long. Where can folks go to see your tour dates, get tickets, and to come see y'all?
TheStringdusters.com is always the best place to see the tour dates. And we're going to be everywhere. We're kind of, this year, with the new record, we've been really kind of hitting every corner of the country that we possibly can. So I'm sure that we're coming to a town near where you are, real soon. So we look forward to seeing everybody out there.
Yep, these guys are road dogging it. It's the infamous Stringdusters. I've been joined by Andy Falco. I've also been joined by Daniel Flanigan of Token Flat Picks. Sure appreciate these guys for hanging out with me for just a little while before Merlefest. Of course, WDVX is proud to be a media sponsor, and of course, I've been happy to hang out with these guys. Thanks to you both for chatting with me for a little bit and hanging this afternoon.
Thank you.